Well, Trump could be working on a very bold move to finally eliminate the boogeyman for all gun owners.
Everybody here, even this side, appreciates it, I believe.
And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of this potential approach to finally shut down the ATF in a way that maybe a lot of us didn't see coming, but actually makes a lot of sense considering who he's put at the head of the FBI and the ATF. Now, in the pros and cons that we're going to talk about of how this could work, I want to give some examples of why maybe something like this should be done, but also some of the positive and potentially negative effects that it could have into the future. So we'll talk about this, and of course I want to hear your opinion. If you think this is a good idea or it's just not good enough, whatever your opinion is, let me know down below. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So what is this bold move that Trump could be working on? Well, that is the merger between the FBI and the ATF. Now, if we look at evidence to support this, Trump, for the first time ever, put Kash Patel as FBI director and acting ATF director. Now, we've heard about Dan O'Kelly maybe being a more permanent option for the ATF, but what if he was to dissolve the ATF into the FBI? How could that potentially help us? And how could it potentially hurt us? That's what I want to focus on. Let's look at the FBI and the ATF. Clinton actually tried this in the 90s. He tried merging, I think, the DEA and the FBI, and then moving regulatory responsibilities from the ATF to the IRS. Now, you mentioned these three-letter agencies, and it's like, don't trust them, don't trust them, don't trust them. That's the way we are wired, right? I mean, that's never going to change. But one thing they said back then is, look, we have 140 federal agencies trying to enforce 4,100 laws on the books. I looked it up. Actually, right now we have 18,000 federal, local, state, and county officials all enforcing the laws in the United States. The point I'm getting at is you have a lot of overlap, right? The DEA, the FBI, the ATF, and many more. Their one true goal is to stop criminals and to try and make America a safer place. Well, who Trump has put into place here is very important because his sole mission, from what he said, is to catch bad guys, not to spy on Americans, and certainly not to use the ATF as some kind of political tool to essentially restrict the rights of gun owners, which is, of course, what we've seen over the past 4 years. If you rein in the ATF under the FBI's wing, you can start to kind of see how this may help us if the goal of the agency is to stop criminals, not focus on gun owners and simple errors and things like that. The problem is ATF and FBI don't work well together. There's been kind of established history of this, where one agency is like, I don't feel like I'm important enough. The ATF is kind of a great example. They run out of bad guys to catch or whatever. Sounds impossible, but okay. They say, hey, we're gonna raid the house of this gun owner, or we're gonna bust this FFL for this mistake they made, or we're gonna create arbitrary rules that gun owners have to follow, even though we've been agreeing to the same principle for 10 years. We're just going to change it up. You would potentially eliminate a lot of that. And I think it comes down to funding. It has to. It's like, hey, look at what we did. Look at all the great things we did, while the rest of us see a wake of destruction, distrust, and lives taken of people and dogs and everybody else. And that's what we see. So if you get ATF and FBI under the same rule, same mission, same focus, then you improve communication. Then you have a clear chain of command. They're not worried necessarily about funding and having to prove that, hey guys, we're important too. They're just there under the FBI with that sole mission to catch bad guys and make this country safer. Not focus on the fact that you have an AR-15 that they really don't like, or maybe even a pistol with a brace on it. The other part of it is, do the regulatory responsibilities stay than with the FBI. Okay, if they do, you also got to make sure that FFLs, right, get the stuff they need to continue their business. And there can't be a slowdown in that. The other part of it is, can you still work to dissolve a lot of the gun laws and a lot of the restrictions and rules that we need taken off of the books if you don't technically have the ATF in place? I think you could. I mean, a lot of this still has to go through Congress, but still, I think you could still do it, right? Because there's still going to be those rules and regulations, unfortunately, and then maybe you can just slowly start to chip away at those, because I think this is just going to take time. I think that makes sense, because you're talking about 90 years worth of restrictions that have been placed upon us. It's not going to happen in just a couple weeks or even a year, right? It's going to take more than that. But with persistence and the guy leading the FBI and the ATF, I think we truly can get this done, because we know his position on these things. So we need these things still to be chipped away. That's one of the things I talked about with abolishment. Totally fine. This is a form of abolishment, essentially. But you got to have the laws, the rules, the regulations, the stuff that doesn't need to be restricted. You still got to be able to remove those things, right? So whether you need the ATF as a named organization or not, the rules are still the same there, right? There's still a goal that we have to accomplish. And if they're under the FBI, maybe it's easier for us to actually get those things done. You know, maybe it's not so politically charged. Maybe you get people in there like Dan Bongino that say, okay, you know a lot about firearms, or you should, right? You work for the ATF, so this is your job. Taking these restrictions, we're going to present these to the president, and we're going to try to get these removed. Or taking concealed carry reciprocity, getting that into Congress. Suppressors, the Hearing Protection Act, getting that to Congress. You could actually have somebody like a Dan Bongino putting the ATF, since this is what they're already supposed to be doing, or what they already know, you could be actually putting them to work to push through these things faster to remove those restrictions from us. Now, the negative side of this is you create kind of a super police officer, a RoboCop almost, that could be a bigger boogeyman for us in the future. Kash Patel's confirmation is good for 10 years. But what happens after that? What happens if you get somebody in there, a Biden type, that is looking to restrict your rights? Now they have the FBI, which means the NICS background check system, which means FISA, which means ATF rule or regulatory responsibilities that were under the ATF, all under one umbrella. Now, if you want to shrink government, this seems like a really good way to do it, but you also create a potential bigger boogeyman. But here's the beautiful part about it if they do this right. If you remove the regulations and the rules and the restrictions set upon gun owners, well, even if you do get somebody in there that's not as kind to the Second Amendment, not as willing to push forward rights, you kind of cut them off at the source, because there's no longer any arbitrary rules or regulations, or very little of those to actually enforce. You almost have to get rid of the rules and regulations, and then you have to have a certain set of checks and balances at the FBI, because it would be bigger than what it is, to make sure they do not overreach and just start coming up with new rules, which they could do. But do we want it under the ATF, or do we want to kind of shrink this thing, get rid of them, and potentially have a better system to get this stuff removed under the FBI? Maybe that's the possibility. Maybe that's the play that Trump is actually working for. This is an unprecedented kind of a move for him to put the same director under two agencies like this. That could be the move he's making. You just got to be really careful with the way it plays out after he leaves office. There you go. Here's my opinion. Let me know what you think down below. Big thanks to you guys. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.